Today we are going to study about the Sayyid dynasty, that is from 1414 to 51. The Tughlaq dynasty ended soon after, but the Sultanate survived, though it was merely a shadow of its former self. Timur's nominee captured Delhi and was proclaimed the new Sultan, the first of the Sayyid dynasty, which was to rule during the earlier half of the 15th century. Sayyid rule was short-lived and was confined to a radius of some 200 miles around Delhi. They kept the machinery going until a more capable dynasty, the Lodhis, took over. The Lodhis were of pure Afghan origin, which meant the eclipse of the Turkish nobility. The Lodhi Sultans 1451 to 1526. Behlul Lodhi was one of the Afghan Sardars who established himself in the Punjab after the Timurid invasion. The most important Lodhi Sultan was the Sikandar Lodhi, who controlled the Ganga Valley as far as western Bengal. He moved the capital from Delhi to a new town which later became famous as the city of Agra. To be able to control the kingdom better, the Sultan had to deal with the tribal character of the Afghan nobles. The Afghan concept was of partnership rather than subservience to the king. In matter of succession, they were guided by consideration of suitability rather than the principle of heredity or nomination. The army turned into a tribal militia, making it less effective. Some of the Sultan's privileges and prerogatives came to be commonly used by some nobles and recognized as the main crops of the Lodi kings. Attempts were made to pacify them by granting them large iktas. The first two Lodi kings modified the autocracy of the Sultanate and thus made an appeal to the Afghan loyalty, but the last Lodi, Ibrahim, asserted the absolute power of the Sultan and did not consider tribal feelings. This led to the making of enemies among them. Finally, they plotted with Babur, the king of Kabul, a descendant of Tamerlane and the Genghis Khan, and succeeded in overthrowing Ibrahim in 1526 at the First Battle of Panipat. Rana Sanga of Mewar, who dreamed of this ruling from Delhi, also made an alliance with Babur, who, however, founded his own dynasty in India, and his descendants, the Mughals, created their own empire in India, causes of the downfall of the Delhi Sultanate. No individual sultan can be held responsible for the downfall of the Delhi Sultanate. Regional factors of disintegration were strong in medieval India. There were also numerous powerful chiefs who either had a clan following of their own or had strong links with particular areas. They were always ready to rebel when they found any weakness in the central government. The Turkish sultans tried to counter these elements first by collecting a corps of slaves. Creator nobility completely dependent on the sultan. The main instrument of this device was the Ikta system. However, the sultans found it difficult to control the powerful and ambitious nobles. Even among this limited group, many of them wanted to carve out their own independent spheres of authority. Thus, it was always difficult to control the governors of distant places such as Bengal, Sindh, Gujarat, Daulatabad, etc. The recruitment of the army also created a problem. Once the sultans of Delhi had been cut off from the Western and Central Asia, they could no longer hope to recruit Turkish and other soldiers from that area. They had therefore to fall upon the Afghans, many of whom had settled in India. Descendants of the Turkish soldiers who had come to India mainly at the time of occupation, Mongols and Muslim converts, and Hindus belonging to what might be called the martial communities, Rajput, Jats, etc. Each of these sections had their own problem. Firoz tried to give preference to the descendant of the Turks and Mongols by giving them a hereditary character. He also recruited Muslims in his corps of slaves. Neither proved a success. The hereditary soldiers proved inefficient and corps of slaves selfish and disloyal. Each of these groups were also antagonistic to each other. Another problem facing the sultans was that of succession. There was no rule whereby the eldest son could succeed. This led to struggles for succession in which ambitious nobles found an opportunity to further their own interests. The administration of the Sultanate. The Sultan's administration was concerned mainly with the work of collecting and recording the revenue from the land and maintaining law and order. This they achieved with Ikta system. The Ikta was a territorial assignment and its holder was designed as Mukti. The Muktis had the right to collect and appropriate taxes, especially land revenue, due to the king during the latter's pressure. The Ikta, however, also implied in return certain obligations on the part of the Mukti to the Sultan, the major one being to maintain troops and furnish them to the Sultan when needed. The revenues he appropriated from the Ikta were thus meant to provide him with resources wherewith to fulfill these obligations. The Mukti was thus tax collector and army paymaster. Also, commander rolled into one. The area that the Sultan did not give an Ikta was called the Khalisa. Here, the Sultan officials Amils collected taxes directly for the royal treasury when the Gorians conquered northern India. The conquest it was initially divided up among commanders who maintained themselves and their troops by plunder and collected tribute. The sultans from the Iltutmish onwards enforced the practice of transferring muktis from one ikta to another. The mukti also seems to have been free to sub-assign small iktas to anyone he chose from within his own larger Ikta. He also probably normally paid his troops by his means. The sultans sought always to enlarge their own Khalisa. However, a later tradition related to Iltutmish paid cavalry soldiers on his own central army 2,000 or 3,000 in number by assigning them villages which came to be called Iktas, paralleling similar sub-assignments by Muktis. The practice continued under Balban 1266 to 86, who, in spite of discovering great abuse, did not seek to abolish the assignments, but only to reduce or resume those from which full or proper service was not forthcoming. And well before the fall of the Balban's dynasty, the Sultan expected that excess amounts of fawzil must be sent from the Iktas to the Sultan's treasury, and one could say that inherent in the calculation of the excess was an estimation of tax income of the Ikta and the expenditure on the troops the Muktis were expected to maintain. Sultan's Balban's appointment of a Khwaja accountant along with the Mukti suggests perhaps that the Sultan's government was now trying to discover what was actually collected and spent within the Ikta. Major changes during the reign of Alauddin Khalji 1296 to 1316, the system of paying Sultan's own cavalry troops by assignment of villages was abolished. The entire revenue of the Khalisa was brought into the treasury, and the troops were paid in cash by the treasury, and that iktas were given only to the commanders in lieu of personal salaries. Alauddin Khilji decreed the new system of assessment and collection of agrarian taxes in large region, the bulk of which, as Barani himself shows, was under Mukti. The tax income Kharaj from each ikta was estimated at a particular figure by the finance department, Diwan-e-Wizrat. The department remained on constant lookout for an opportunity to enhance this estimate. Out of the estimated ikta income, a certain amount was allowed for the pay Mawazib of the troops Hasham placed under the Mukti or Wali. The area expected to yield this amount was apparently set apart by the Diwan. The remainder was treated as the Mukti's own establishment of officials. He had to pay into treasury or realization above the amount allowed for the pay of the army and for his own income. The Muktis were naturally tempted to conceal their true receipt and so understate the excess payable by them to the Sultan. Alauddin Khilji's harsh measure, including imprisonment and physical torture, were aimed at keeping a check on this tendency. Revenue officials were kept by him for long years in chains and subjected to torture for small misappropriation. Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq had no radical changes to introduce in this system except to propound moderation. He also declared that the increase in the estimate of income should not be over 1/10 or 1/11 annually, since the burden of any such enhancement could be passed only by Mukti to the peasantry. Under Muhammad Tughlaq 1325 to 51, we find a further extension of the control of the Sultan's government. The two functions of collecting taxes and maintaining the troops now began to be separated. It is possible that the separation arose primarily out of a desire to obtain larger income. This meant in effect that the apportionment of the Iqta reserved for the solidarity under the Khaljis and Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq was now taken out of the commander's hands altogether. Only the part sufficient to yield his own salary was left to him as his Iqta. Firoz Tughlaq's accession 1351 took place amidst a severe political crisis, and he began his reign by promising concession to the nobility. He decreed that there should be new estimate of the revenue, Mahsul of the Sultanate, and within 4 years this was prepared, the total amounting to 67 crores 5 lakh and or 68 crores 5 lakh tankas. The figure was designated jam, a term used for the first time, and no change was made in it for the remainder of the reign of the Sultan. The fixity of the jam meant that the muktis would be troubled on account of enhancement in payment due from them to the treasury. The auditing of the accounts at the court now became a comfortable and even pleasant business for the muktis. Firoz also increased the personal pay of his great nobles, whereas the highest personal pay of nobles under Muhammad Tughlaq was 2 lakh takas for Khans. Firoz gave his Khans or Maliks for their personal income alone the pay of 4 lakh, 6 lakh or 8 lakh tankas, reaching in the case of his vizier 1 crore 3 lakh tankas. In lieu of this, they obtained separate iktas and pragnas. One should infer from this that the Khalisa was greatly reduced. He re-established the system of paying soldiers by assigning them the revenue of villages as waj, a new term in lieu of the salaries, mawajib. Soldiers who are not assigned waj were paid their salaries in cash from the treasury or by way of drafts, itlaq, barat, or on the iktas of the nobles to be adjusted against the payment of excess due from them to the treasury. Firoz conferred offices of disease incumbents upon their sons. No restoration of central control of earlier times was possible under the successors of Firoz. Under the Lodhis 1451 to 1526, the system remained essentially similar, but a reorganization occurred. The term Ikta now disappears from view, replaced simply by Sarkars and Pragnas. These were territorial divisions, each Sarkar comprising a number of Pragnas, a group of Pragnas placed under the Sarkar of a noble, and thus in older terminology, his Ikta would be called first a Sarkar and then simply a Sarkar. Each Sarkar was assigned a jam or estimated revenue whose purpose could only be to lay down to some extent the military and other obligations of the noble holding of the Sarkar assignment, and the village remained the basic unit of administration. The village had three main officials: the headman, Mukaddam, the accountant, Patwari, and who kept the local records, and the Mushrif, who supervised the accounts and attended to the revenue when it was collected. At the court, the Wazir, Chief Minister, supervised the collection of revenue, the checking of accounts, and the regulation of expenditure. The other ministers were the head of the military department, which kept a record of soldiers, equipment in the Sultan's army, and of the feudal levies, men in charge of interest relations, and the chancellor, who dealt with the state correspondence and relation between the court and provincial officials. The chief Qazi was the chief judge and also gave advice in religious matters. The Wazir supervised the work of all these officers. He also advised the Sultan.